Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Robots and Red Tape. As always, I'm your host, Nick Schutt here. Lucky to have Mr. Richard Threlkeld here with us today. Richard, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you, Nick?
Man, it's another day in paradise. Thanks so much for asking. Really appreciate it, man. Richard, if you don't mind, would you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of how you got here, man? What's your story? What do you do?
So I'm a CEO of two companies, so two small businesses, Axiom AI and Valiant AI. And today we're focusing more on Valiant AI. So it's artificial intelligence in the healthcare arena, particularly for organ allocation. So I was actually born in Texas, grew up in Georgia, went to Georgia Tech. My undergrad spent about 12 years in the U.S. Army, about 5 years active duty. The rest was reserve. Then went and worked for the big boys. So Lockheed Martin, General Electric Research. I worked for Georgia Tech Research Institute. And then as I was actually started my PhD. I got cancer. So I got thyroid cancer, and it kind of tilted my life perspective. I wanted to give back somehow. And they came up and asked me, hey, like we have this problem in kidney discard. In
Mhm.
kidney allocation. I said, like, I don't know if that's me, right? Like, I'm an outside, I'm not medical, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not like, you know, an expert in organs or biomedical things, right? So my degree was in systems engineering and AI, and then like I'd worked in government systems engineering and mainly DoD and government stuff before that. But I was like, had a feel like I had a calling to it, right?
Mhm.
So accepted it, and then graduated last year, and then started Valiant AI, uh, and so far saved about 40 lives with our technologies.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. Thank you for your service and yeah, thank you for the story. That's incredible. So, um, you were given the problem of kidney allocation and kidney transplant allocation. Can you just I would assume most people don't know what that means or outside of like there's a list and people call down it. But can you give an overview of kind of how that works today in this country at a high level and why is it so complex, Richard?
Yeah. So, organ allocation in the US relies on a centralized waiting list, right? So it's managed by the OPTN, so the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network. And there's many, many people involved in this, a bunch of stakeholders and people who kind of touch the system in different ways to serve different purposes. So you have OPOs, so Organ Procurement Organizations. So if like I went when you get your driver's license, right, they ask you want to be an organ donor, right? So if you check that box, and we're going to use me as an example, right? So if I died tomorrow, right? So the OPO is responsible for contacting my next of kin, which would be my wife in this case, right? And
Mhm.
saying, hey, Richard said he wanted to be an organ donor. Are you okay with that? Yes, okay. So she would say yes, of course, right? And then they're in charge of allocating, right, all of my organs. So my liver, my kidney, my heart, my lungs to people who need them,
Mhm.
right? So for kidneys in particular, right? So we have about 100,000 people on a wait list to get kidneys. So this is the organ that has the highest demand, the highest need.
Mhm.
Um, and unfortunately, even though we have this really, really high demand, about 34% of kidneys were non-utilized last year. So that's a lot. We have a big need, we have a big supply, and a lot of these kidneys could have gone to people on the list potentially,
Mhm.
is what indicates in the research. So we have transplant centers, right? So we have all these patients, these about 100,000 patients on the list, right? And about 800,000 people with end stage renal disease. All that means is they need a kidney, right? And
Mhm.
they're not maybe still too sick to get on the list. A bunch of reasons for that. But so this 100,000 people who are waiting on the list, right, go to these transplant centers to get on their list, right? They've got to maybe they're on dialysis 3 times a week, right? So if you know anybody, it's not exactly the best scenario, right? So one of the most successful ways to treat this is a kidney transplant. Hence why there's such a high demand for it. Um, so we have all these people on the list, right? So like let's say my kidney went out, right? And so they go down the list in order through this 100,000 people on this list. But a lot of things get complex in the middle here, right? So as you
Mhm.
can imagine, right? Maybe there's not an OR available. Maybe the surgeon gets sick. Maybe my surgeon gets sick, right? So like I couldn't do it, or maybe I get sick, right? And I can't go undergo the procedure to get a new kidney. And so this all happens in real time, but my kidney is still, degrades over time, right? So it's not
Mhm.
like it's not lasting forever.
Of course.
So, you know, they have to, the OPO has to go through and offer this to all these people. But even if you get a yes, right, it could turn into a no. And so like that's how kidneys can end up non-utilized. And then, there's complex algorithms that consider medical urgency, waiting time, compatibility, between a given donor and recipient. And then, we try to maximize this efficiency and this fairness and try to get the best transplant outcome. You consider geography, right? So, like, I'm in Orlando, right? I can get a direct flight almost anywhere thanks to Disney
Mhm.
World, right?
Yep.
Right. But if you're in, the middle of Wyoming, that's not the same case, right? So,
Mhm.
and like, again, over time, right, the kidney doesn't, the kidney's got a lifespan of, people can look at the research, but like 20 to 40 hours, you've got to get this thing into the next person, right? The
Mhm.
transplant recipient. So it's complex because demand's higher than supply, right? So we don't have enough organs for everybody, right? Each
Mhm.
year, and the list is growing and growing. The patients all have different needs, right? One kidney might not be the best for, number one on the list, but might be the right answer for the person who's 500 on the list, right?
Mhm.
And then, both, these OPOs and transplant centers all have different ways to deal with things and different rules. There's few standards that go across everybody that make them do it the exact same way.
Mhm. Absolutely. So how many kidneys were on average are available on an annual basis? Do you know?
Yeah, so I want to say they did about 30,000 transplants last year, but let me look that up and make sure
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
are done.
And I'm just kind of running backwards from it because I'm thinking if you said 34%.
So yeah, so this is 26,000 in 2022.
Yeah.
So,
So in 2022, there was 26,000. Assume 30% of the available organs did not get placed, right?
yep.
Which leads to, a couple thousand organs getting thrown away. Is that right? Like conservatively, I don't have an exact number, but these are
Yeah,
organs
so
that,
so let's use rough math. Let's say
yeah,
30,000 were done. That means about 9,000 kidneys were non-utilized, right? That's a lot.
right. Absolutely, especially when considering that that's about 10% of the overall demand of the list right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you started a company you obviously you started a company to address this specific problem and so how does it work? How does your product work? Understanding that, there are thousands of organs that are being thrown away on an annual basis that could go in and help people, could get put into folks.
Yeah, yeah. So we basically use the historical data, right? So fortunately the databases are pretty good, right? So they keep track of all the donors, where the kidneys go, and we just developed an artificial intelligence model, it's just basically math, right? So an algorithm to determine when a kidney is at risk for non-utilization, right?
Mhm.
And then the second model indicates who would most likely benefit from this given kidney, and
Mhm.
then how can we make it the most fair, right? We want to skip the least amount of people on the list.
Mhm.
So we actually offer it for free, which like if you want to go save a life, save a kidney, you can sign up on our website. You can go type in your information, ask for access to the model,
Mhm.
and it's free, right? So if you want to go save a life, right? Our product, what we do is we go in, we do an on-prem solution for them, so we integrate it into the software, so you're not typing in every single person, right? So
Mhm.
for time's sake, right, at the enterprise level, right, they like us to go in and build an on-prem solution for them.
Right. Absolutely. And now all this is um now, what are some of the biggest inefficiencies in this process? And what are some of the ones that you think, and second part of the question, Richard, what are some of the big inefficiencies that you think people should be paying more attention to that they're not?
Yeah, so there's a high variability between centers, right? So you can go on the OPTN website. You can look up the transplant center that you're registering to and watch like what's their mortality rate, meaning like how many people are dying on their list, how
Mhm.
many people are they accepting. You've got some choices as the patient. Standardization, right? So each OPO is not equal. All transplant centers aren't equal, right? So they all have different performance levels. You can look those up as well. Yeah, another big inefficiency is logistics. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't have access to real-time information and analytical tools to say like maybe it was better to just drive it, across the state than try to hop it on a plane, right? Get it
Mhm.
over. I know of some companies using some pretty cool technologies to try to use drones to transport, which is kind of
Interesting.
cool.
That
Yeah,
is cool.
interesting use of technology there to try to get after this logistics problem because most kidneys are actually on your commercial flights you fly on every day, right? So
Wow.
they put them down there, they put them in there, and they get shipped via commercial and come out
Mhm.
the other side.
Yeah, man.
But just like you fly all the time, people fly all the time, right? Delays happen,
Yep.
right? Yeah, all the maybe your flight gets canceled. Same thing. That kidney was probably going to save somebody's life, and now we've got to reallocate it, right? So these
Mhm.
happens. So these are big inefficiencies within the system. The OPOs are incentivized different than transplant centers, right? OPOs are trying to use every single kidney they can. Transplant centers, right, are trying to use the best kidney for their patient, right? So those are combative. Those are combative metrics. And it honestly leads to all this discard you're seeing.
Right. So just clarify for folks. If I say Nick Schutt, leave my house in an hour, get run over by a car, get hit, I'm dead, right? Instantly, right? Now there's 24 to 40 hours between my being deceased and my organs no longer being viable transplant options. Is that correct?
Yeah, kind of, right? So there's a lot of things that factor in this
Course.
because you're gonna go to a donor hospital, but once you're pronounced dead, and if there's not anything trying to take care of your body, because we do have they do have donor care units, which
Mm,
means they hook you up to oxygen and try to like keep the organs healthy as
hmm.
they plan to get them out. But once you're on the operating table and they start cutting you open, yeah, you've got between 20 40 hours to get those organs used. And there
Okay.
are technologies that are coming out with like pump technologies and other technologies that are helping to extend that. But as of right now, yeah.
Absolutely. And then there's 100,000 people waiting for a kidney. So I say I'm deemed that both of my kidneys, because everybody has two, or most people have two, I should say, are
Yep.
both my kidneys are deemed acceptable. 20 to 40 hours, they need to be in somebody else, right? And in this process, 34% most recently are just not be of usable kidneys are not being used.
Yeah, and I mean some OPOs, some areas of the country are hitting 45 to 50%.
Okay.
So I mean it's like I mean like I said, there's a range across the country for sure.
hmm Yeah, and so have they always been at this discard rate?
No, so that's a great question. So this is the other like factor that blows my mind. So when I started like getting my PhD at Missouri University of Science and Technology, the discard rate average was 21%.
When
And
was
so
that?
in that was 2020, right?
Okay,
So that was
so
actually
so
the
in
fall of
five
2020.
years, in
Yep,
5 years we went from 21% to 34% discard rate. What
correct.
happened?
Yep. Yeah, so it's a lot of the inefficiencies I just mentioned, right? So like you're trying there's kind of a combination of factors, right? So you have the inefficiencies, right? You have the high demand, right? So like, the other inefficiency here is just if you doubled the amount of available kidneys, if the resources aren't available at the transplant centers for the surgeons, right? The
Mhm.
hospitals, the OR rooms, right? You could try some, but like transplant surgeons just can't start working 120 hours a week, right? So
No, of course.
so you know what I mean. So like it's a push and flow, right? Of between the OPOs and the transplant centers. But still trying to find especially for these marginal kidneys, trying to find the right person and doing it in the right amount of time is really, really difficult, and they don't have a lot of tools to help them.
Absolutely. And no, that makes sense. And so like and again, using with the using the example, my kidneys are out there, and say again, you're the guy at the transplant center in charge of placing them, right? So, or where do they go from there? So for me, they go to a transplant center or to an OPO.
Yeah, so great question. So they could go to a hospital, right? A local
Right.
hospital, but the OPO is still, the organ procurement organization is still responsible for allocating your kidney. So they're going
Okay.
to arrange for the travel to the transplant center. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is so say, where do you live again? Where are you
I'm
out
in
of?
DC area.
Okay, so DC. So let's say the transplant, the best patient, right, with the matches the best is in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're gonna have a DC to Anchorage, and then it's got a ground travel out to somewhere, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so some things are just impossible logistically, right?
Right.
But there's nothing to tell you that, right? So they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna still make the offer to the transplant, patient in Alaska that never would happen anyway, because they don't
Right.
know that, right? They're still required to make that offer if they're going over. If that person's number one, they're going to offer it to the person in Alaska who's never going to take it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because logistically you just can't get it there in time,
Correct.
right? So that's kind of an extreme example, but that's kind of to kind of let you know how it goes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so you're going down this list. So now we go 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and this kidney, let's say they've taken your kidney out, right? So now they're going to biopsy it. They're going to check vascular changes. They're going to check interstitial fibrosis. They're going to check the health of it.
Mm-hmm.
And and so as we're cold ischemia is going along, right? So like the cells are dying still, right? So we're still getting
Mm-hmm.
necrosis occurring. And now, 8, 10 hours later, your chance to discard this kidney has doubled, tripled even from what it was. And you're healthy, you're young,
Right.
so you probably wouldn't have a problem. But if you're, a 65, 60-year-old kidney, yeah, you're probably just guaranteed that this kidney was going to be thrown away.
Right.
And so, the other flip side of this is to, for a kidney, let's not as a society and as a system use a kidney and start pulling these kidneys out and paying all those transplant, surgeons still have to go in and take that out, pay for it all if it never had a chance to go into anyone anyway, right? So like the other way people are thinking of using AI is maybe I die, right? And except
Mm-hmm.
I'm 70 and did some overdose on a drug, right? And my
Yeah.
kidneys are wrecked, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're not coming back. Well, we can tell you that up front, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
it's a 99.9% chance this is not going to be utilized. Don't use it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
don't waste your time, right? And resources, because our resources are precious. We don't have unlimited checks and surgeons don't have unlimited time,
Mm-hmm.
right? To just not bother. And we can even run test match runs to see not only we think this is a bad kidney, but it's not really a good match for anyone out of the 100,000, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a balance to use of this,
Right.
right? So let's say we did see a match. Let's say we got number one on the list. Great match. It's in Virginia, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're gonna go in. You're gonna go to the OR. They're gonna cut you open, and maybe it's possible they use multiple of your organs. That's absolutely possible. So they're gonna take out every organ that is able to be allocated
Mm-hmm.
and be able to, ship it to somebody who's needs. So if I needed it down in Orlando and I accepted it, so they would put it on a commercial flight from DC to Orlando. It would land, right? They would call me up, make sure I'm good to go, make sure I have everything ready. I'd be waiting in the OR room, hopefully, right? And then that kidney gets delivered and gets put inside me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Absolutely. No, absolutely. That's really, really interesting. And so are the breakdowns seem to be in qualifying organs before they're even out of the body
Yep.
and where and how do you most efficiently and fairly place an organ with somebody. But also it sounds like there's like while obviously the list is super important and like time on the list should of course be a part of it. It sounds like there's like if you're gonna if it happens to me and you're gonna call the person that is logistically there's just no way that they're ever gonna get it, and you're gonna waste the precious time that you have talking to people that are or asking people and offering it to them, even though there was no way they were ever going to say yes. That just feels like just feels incredibly antiquated, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, and especially if like you know, if I'm number one on the list, I'm most likely going to get a ton of offers, right?
Hmm.
And so like if I'm going to say no to you anyway, right? You would think that, especially for like marginal type of kidneys, that they would have a special allocation path, right? That maybe they offered to somebody who's, number 99,000 on the list, that's it, and give the patient the option, because the patient should have the option, right? So can you take this, maybe it's not a perfect kidney, but maybe it gives you, 5, 6, 7 years of life,
Hmm.
right? And you're 75, maybe you get a good candidate, but let the patient decide, right?
Yeah.
Or you could be on the wait list for another 6 years,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
never get it anyway. So,
Hmm.
it's very complicated from that point of view.
Hmm.
And then you mentioned fairness, which is a good one, because I always use the extreme example of, like, so you've been waiting 5 years, which is very common, right? For
Hmm.
waiting for a kidney on dialysis 3 times a week, right? And so OPOs can do what they call open allocation. So if so much time has passed, or for whatever reason they think that the kidney is at risk, right? So our algorithm helps them with that these days now.
Hmm.
Uh, that they can go open allocation. It means put it in anyone. Like, try to send it to people who you think, just to try to save this kidney, right?
Hmm.
And so that's kind of saving efficiency, right? Because we're trying to get people off the list, right? We want the list to be zero, right? We want to save as many lives as we can. But like you said, it's got to be fair too. And so, like, fairness, we usually say, so like, if I just got on the list yesterday, you've been on for 5 years, and I get the kidney, right? I got the kidney because somebody open allocated it. Is that fair? Well, most people would say no,
Depends on the
but
situation.
exactly. So let's look at medical urgency. What if I was going to die tomorrow,
Right.
right? Or die next week, right? So like, everybody's like, oh no, like, he needs a kidney in the next 7 days or he's going to die. But Nick's going to live another 5 years. Yes, it's on dialysis. It's not ideal, right?
Hmm.
But so this is like the trade that everybody that we're trying to do, right? And so it's not like I came up with it. It's not like this. So society, like, we've created algorithms to try to do optimal allocation in that way. But it's led to all this discard, because we're going down this wait list. So it's not an easy answer,
Hmm.
frankly.
Yeah. So, and is it literally people just making phone calls, going down a list? Is that how
Oh,
it
it really is. Yeah. Yeah,
literally?
yeah. Yeah, it
Okay.
literally is, right? So I mean, they have DonorNet and they can make offers, but for the final offer, they are usually calling it up. At most of these OPOs are on the phone calling every 30 minutes down this list. And right, time's ticking, as I said.
Mhm.
So that's another huge inefficiency. And I
Yeah.
think, it's time for technology to help a lot in this allocation system.
I completely agree with you. And then also, you look at, um, yeah, I mean, you talk about resource allocation, right? Yeah, I mean, there's a finite number of people that can be on dialysis 3 times a week in this country. We have a finite number of resources allocated to, dialysis machines and dialysis availability and things like that. And so, getting people off the list, even if it's only for 5 years, 10 years, because you're able to get a kidney in them, frees up resources in other ways, right? And so how does your, and you know, how are these OPOs structured? And is there a uniform way in which they operate, or is it all done like organization by organization?
Yeah, it's very OPOs are different. Some have own organ donor care units, which means they kind of have like a little hospital in to like care for the donors.
Hmm.
Some have coordinators, some have two per donor, some have one per donor. All of them have different what we call standards of work, right? Which is how they allocate. UNOS has kind of a very high level, but how they go to open offer, especially, will differ from OPO, organ procurement organization, to OPO to OPO. Some use cold ischemia time, some use KDPI, so that's Kidney Donor Profile Index. So that's just a number from 1 to 100 to say one is like the best kidney ever, and the 100 is like a very marginal kidney.
Hmm.
Um, so they all have different methods of how they go to open allocation and how they allocate. So it's not this exact same from OPO to OPO, and they are in competition with each other, right? So with the newest, so they do have a tier system, right? Tier one is your best OPOs. Tier two is like mid. Tier three is actually threatened to lose their contract, right? So like, it's it's almost as the system is incentivizing, innovate, but also, you know, you shouldn't be sharing all your secrets with everybody, right? So that would
Mhm.
disincentivize you. So I was surprised to learn it's built that way. Um, uh, as far as the structure of the OPOs.
Okay. How do they compete against each other?
Yeah, they have metrics. So they have like number of organs recovered per population, right? So discard, right? So but you could imagine you can kind of game the system if you'd imagine, right? So like you can if you wanted to lower your discard rate, well, you would just pick the best kidneys, right? And you wouldn't pursue any marginal kidneys, right? So like there's ways to like get around that and it's not all caught. So they're in competition because if they're not tier one, they're at risk to losing their contract, right? So this kind of goes into the contractual piece, right? So Medicare and Medicaid pay for this as well as some private insurance, right? So they have to keep their status to keep their contracts to be able to do organ transplant.
Hmm. Interesting. And so do you think the discard rate increase has anything to do with like lowered organ acceptance because of the business side of it?
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to say it isn't a factor, right? I mean, certainly they are, on the transplant center side, they're incentivized to maximize patient outcome. Well, so if I'm a stakeholder, you can't, you shouldn't punish me or think poorly because I'm thinking in my best interest, right? That's naturally
Mhm.
what the system has done, right? So if you're trying to get the best patient outcomes, well, guess what? You're only going to take the best kidneys.
Mhm.
So, it's surprising to see some of the incentivizations that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do they yeah, how do they make the decision and how do you rate the quality of an organ before it goes into somebody? And like what do you like and are you all like and also are you rating it for like match to like donor match as well as just viability match, or are the ratings viability match and then like the donor piece come like the match to other folks come in? Because I would assume that there would be cases where either somebody has like it's a perfect kidney, but they have like a rare disease or something, or there's something like, or that's a rare, I would assume blood type is involved in this. Like I would
Mhm.
like, or there's a rare blood type, and so that's only gonna, fit 8 people on the list or something like that, right? Like, can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I will clarify, I am not a transplant doc and
No,
I'm a
no,
medical
no, no.
doctor,
I
right? So
just
I do
no,
want to say it that way, but
yeah,
I can still answer the question. So this is
yeah.
like the knowledge gained through interviews and through like looking at this for half a decade here. The
Mm-hmm.
So they do look at medical history, right? So like they do look at like their all of their patients on their list, especially with like an open offer to see if this kidney would be, best. So like for instance, for a medical so let's go back to the case Richard's going to die next week, right? So they're going to be
Mm-hmm.
looking pretty seriously at this kidney like okay, it might not be perfect, but like if he's going to die next week, let's try to get him a kidney, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like they definitely have the like no doubt in my mind transplant surgeons are doing the best they can and are
Of course.
are are using the are being good doctors, right? It's just they need better tools to help them,
Mm-hmm.
all of this information, right? So like biopsy results, age, hypertension, diabetes, like there's a lot of things that go into graft survival, right? Because this
Mm-hmm.
is what, graft survival is, 5-year graft survival would be the percentage that the kidney is still, surviving and good after 5 years. So you wouldn't have to go get another transplant. And so
Mm-hmm.
they look at these, right? But sometimes they have to do the math in their head. Some use some like I'll call it Excel tools. And this is just based off interviews that I've done. But man, there's such an opportunity for tools to have that already done, right? They might be trying to make this decision at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Or it might be 2 a.m. and this is the 14th hour of their shift, right? And they're having to try to make this decision. Man, would it be nice to have a tool to help them do that? And that's what we're bringing.
Absolutely, man. No, it's an incredible mission. It's incredible that you did it. And so now you guys are, you guys are coming in when after how long or how long is a kidney available and viable before your algorithm can come in and like examine it compared to just the standard list that they use?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So we can do it from the very beginning, right? So like some people are seeing, like I told you the scenario where like this kidney isn't gonna, a 99.9% chance it's not gonna be used. We ran a test match run. Nothing's above a couple percentage points. Like this is going to end up not utilized. So don't wait,
Mhm.
maybe don't waste the resources, right? That's one tool you can use, right? And then, so this runs all the way during like donor care, right? So creatinine can change, right? So what think the KDPI can change throughout time,
Mhm.
can get better. Some can get worse depending on donor care methods. And then like once it's out of the body, right? So we're tracking the time, we're tracking biopsy results back. Maybe we think we have a really good kidney and we get biopsy results back and it's, won't work for anybody. But we
Mhm.
can tell you that immediately. We're like, hey, like this is, you should try to put this in somebody because nobody's gonna, it's 99% chance it's going to be not utilized, right? So
Mhm.
you already took it out. You already did the resources to take it out. Don't wait further. Don't follow the list exactly, right? If it's a 99.9% chance it's not going to be utilized, go ahead and open offer.
Mhm. Absolutely. No, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and then what logistical challenge? We already touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the logistical challenges that are associated with it outside of, outside of like physical distance? Like, what are some of the other ones, and what are some of the other difficulties that, can come up from getting it from A to B?
Yeah, I mean, so sometimes you get damaged, right? I mean, so these are, these are being shipped in containers, right? And so like the more secure the box is good, and the more you can do, put it on pump, you can like have additional technology, but that also raises the price through the roof, right?
Mhm.
So like there's this kind of natural ebb and flow of transportation. Distance is one, but also timing, right? So if you're trying to get a kidney out the door on Friday night at midnight, right? Like good luck getting it on a flight till the next morning,
Mhm.
right? So like time is a factor too.
Yeah.
If you're fresh in the morning, and our algorithm luckily takes that into account, right? So like
Mhm.
the worst time is a Friday night at 10 to midnight, right? You're not going to get anything on until the next day, and then like the patient's not going to be available, right? And until that next day, and then you have to have a surgeon available, right?
Mhm.
And especially for these marginal kidneys, they're going to want their best team available, and best teams usually don't work Friday night at midnight, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into logistically getting this from A to B, but also like the timing
Mhm.
and the distance, right? Should we fly it? Should we use a drone? Should we go ground transportation? Is an OR, is an operating room available? Is the surgical team available, right?
Mhm.
And then, by the way, so like not one surgeon takes out every organ, right? So like there's a renal team, there's a heart team, there's a lung team, right? And so
Mhm.
you're trying to get all of these people, sometimes 20, 30 people like across all these organizations together at one time to get these organs out to save these lives all over the United States.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of logistics, a lot of coordination. And does it so do you help with all the pieces of that or just some? And
Right.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
great question. Yeah, so we just touched the cold ischemia time, right? Which is tracking the time that this organ's going to be out of the body, because we know that's directly correlated
Mhm.
to not being utilized.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you plan on expanding into kind of sitting in that entire process and uh
Yeah, great question. So my dissertation actually was on the whole thing, right? So we ran a
okay.
simulation that includes like the logistics, like it acting as like following it from like, so again, like I die, following it from the donor hospital to the OPO, getting cared for, traveling, whether, what is the best way? Is it air? Is it drone? Is it ground, right? And to help
Mhm.
those decision makers make that to get the most probability of saving somebody and getting somebody off that waiting list.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where we expand into, and I'm
Mhm.
pretty transparent about that. As far as that's to have a tool like that would be really, really powerful, but also requires a lot of people to work on their data, right? To get that an API
Mhm.
applied programming information or interface to be able to transfer data in real time. So like not only at the national and the bureaucratic level, right? So like they've got to figure that out as well,
Yeah.
to be able to share that data and share it securely, right? And
Yes.
encrypted. to be able to enable like a real-time digital twin of the organ allocations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, and obviously you have to be very secure with that data.
Yeah.
It's all HIPAA data. It's all
Mhm.
personal information that is all medically related and that has different data standards than, other things, right? HIPAA is I mean, I get to deal with that a lot also, so I understand. And then, what kind of impact have you made as far as reducing waste and saving lives so far?
Yeah, yeah. So one of our OPOs, so what we do is we look at these kind of high risk kidneys that they've used before. That's kind of where we target, right? So we don't use this on all kidneys because like if it has a KDPI of 10, which means it's a great kidney, most likely it's gonna be successfully transferred or transplanted in someone. But these high risk kidneys. So one of our recent customers had a 9% success chance for these high risk, and within 2 months they were hitting 35% success with these marginal kidneys. So that's you know we'll call it 6, 7 kidneys in that time frame. If you multiply that by the whole year, you're talking 40, 50 kidneys, and then if that was multiplied, if every OPO was using this in the United States, that's easy, 25, 3,000 kidneys. And I think that's very doable.
And that's so just to be clear, going back to earlier, that's a third of the waste that you think you can target uh
Yeah, to start with. Yeah.
to start with, right? And how many you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, Richard. How many OPOs are you deployed at now?
Yeah, so we are no, I'm happy to answer that. So we are in four right now. So there's 56 total. There's four,
Mhm.
and then we're expanding to two more within the next 2 months. And so we started September of last year, so this has all occurred within about 6 months.
Okay, so in the last 6 months, you saved 40 lives, you said 40, 50 lives.
Yeah, yeah.
So you found homes for 40 kidneys that were going to get thrown away in the last 6 months that are now in people that are now no longer on the list, no longer on dialysis, taking the strain off the system.
Yes, sir.
Dude, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Congratulations. That's really, really exciting. Especially when you look at, frankly, how small the test sample is. I mean, from what you're doing, not just from a like numbers of centers you're deployed in, but how you're only doing one very small piece of the process and working with I forget what the exact terminology is, but let's say like kidneys with a low transplant probability. Um, that's fantastic, man. No, that's fantastic. And what what as you speak with all of these OPOs, what are some of the challenges that you are facing, you and Valiant are facing as you go in and have these conversations with folks?
Yeah, I think they're definitely seriously worried about the regulation around it, right? So like artificial intelligence is new. It's I'm gonna put quotations new. It's just math. It's just an algorithm. By the way, algorithms are used all over the allocation process already, right? It's used to create the allocation list of who's number one and who's 50,000, who's 100,000.
Hmm.
It's just math at the end of the day, right? We're using historical data to be able to use this, but they're concerned with open allocation. They're concerned with using, something different, something innovative, right? And fortunately, some of these OPOs are willing to take the risk, but I think a lot of them just stand back and wait naturally, right? So like not everybody's risk accepting, right? There is definitely some risk in using it. The model can get it wrong, but as we've seen it save a ton of lives. And if and at the end of the day, the human's still making the decision, right? We just want all the information in front of them to make the decision. So like these OPOs again, they've got like 10 tabs open, right? And
Hmm.
they're trying to allocate it. They're trying to take care of the donor, right? They're trying to ensure that like the organs are going to be the best they can for the given patient. So it's definitely a high stress environment if you ever sit in an organ donor center or organ care center. And and they're trying to allocate, they're on the phone, right, trying to make calls after calls at calls because they're trying to do their best to save a life as well. And from our standpoint, our biggest thing is the data. It's I don't see why, APIs have been around for a while. Cloud computing's been around for a while. Why can't we have this data in real time, right? Secure it, make sure it's encrypted. Like we do all that. Like I've done military stuff for ages. We know how to do this.
Hmm.
It's nothing crazy, but I don't know why in the organ allocation system they don't know they don't use APIs. They've told me it's not secure, which I know that's not true. And it's just frustrating at the data level because to get unlock these advanced algorithms and to use them to the best of their ability, the data needs to be available real time to the right people, encrypted, obviously de-identified. I don't, take it out, man. I don't need to know any of that.
Hmm.
And our algorithms don't need to know any of that. So that's really our struggle, right? And it seems like, you walk back in these tools. I mean, what, we're way above beyond Excel. I know some people love Excel, right? But like it's 2 in the morning, you're having to like enter data manually, right? We can be really efficient these days, with an application that can give these offers, tell you the graft survival, tell you the patient outcome, and what chance of discard it's going to have. So the OPO has all the information, the transplant center has all the information, the patient has all the information to make the best decision for the patient to get the best outcome.
Hmm. Yeah. How do you think you overcome that? Is it just educating people? Because I would assume the folks
Yeah.
that are at these centers, I would assume at least most of them really care about what they do. They're in it for the mission. They believe in it. They're just probably not educated on like IT. Well, IT definitely, but because to your point, like APIs have been around forever. My healthcare practice, we've never had paper records. Like, get that out of here. Like, it's all cloud based. 100% of it is in the cloud, and you just and they're all in. I think they're all in AWS now. I mean, but although when I started using this service like 3 or 4 years ago, they were still like the login screen was still showing Microsoft 2012 Microsoft Server 2012 R2. And I'm like, guys, you guys are moving slower than the government is. But hey.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I am surprised. I mean, so to give it credit, there was a modernization initiative. It's coming out. But 17 people are dying a day, right? And on the kidney waiting list, 17
Right.
people a day dying. It's gonna take a while for them to catch up. And in the meantime, I know I'm gonna do everything I
Right.
can, and I know a lot of people in the industry, both on transplant centers and OPOs, are gonna do as much as they can to save as
Mhm.
many lives they can.
Absolutely. But as they move slowly on modernization, the cost is going to be 17 people a day.
Yeah,
Period.
correct. That's the facts. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And so this is a situation like, and I'm all for looking, let's absolutely be secure as we look at rolling out and implementing new technology, especially in high risk places like this with healthcare and healthcare data, especially when you look at I mean defense areas, defense and intel and other spots that you and I are familiar with, Richard. But um frankly, that cost seems high, and it seems like there's not enough people out there having conversations about how there are 17 people dying a day, and we're throwing away 9,000 kidneys a year. Which, if I'm thinking correctly, I mean, that's not 17 a day, but you know, I'm just curious now. Is what we're throwing away 25 a day?
Ish.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we're throwing away about 25 a day as of 2022-ish, using rough numbers, and 17 people are dying a day. And you have a technology that can come in and with proven history address that and potential and actually save some of those people's lives. Dude, how are you not yelling at people up and screaming up and down in
Oh,
the
I
street
try,
about this?
man. I try. I try. And don't get me wrong, AI has its limitations, right?
No, of course.
It can get it wrong.
Of course.
But from what we've seen so far, I'm like, again, I am screaming to let's for all these kidneys that nobody wants, let the computer try to find the right like the right match for them, right? So let's take, KDPI of 95 plus, right? So like kidneys that will have 80-90% chance that they're not going to be utilized.
Mhm.
Let's do a test case nationally on those that everybody can agree to and be super transparent. Like we publish all our papers, right? We're not, it's not a mystery how we do it. And let it be tested. And if there's other algorithms, let's test those too. But like let's agree that 17 people dying a day is not the answer when we have all these kidneys that are not being utilized. Like there's gotta be a better way.
Yeah, man. I mean, I applaud you. I applaud you for going in and doing this. As you look at implementing it nationwide, like again, what do you think? So, what do you think the roadmap is, and how do you think we can go about, attacking this problem in a substantive way?
Yeah, so I'm gonna like hit data first, right? Data,
Please.
data, 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 right? So like the key to a lot of artificial intelligence algorithms is having a good metadata understood, a foundation that everybody uses. And this isn't unique to medicine.
Yeah.
Medicine has some metadata. It's just adopting that and using it across the all the tools, right? And so, that I think can be done. I think uh, you know, as part of the modernization, AI's got to have a piece of that, right? And we've put recommendations such as what I just said out there to see if they're willing to take it. I think we're as a government as a whole, right? We're in a transition period that will occur, and then nationwide, yeah, I'm just trying to talk to every OPO, right? And some of them, most of them are willing to do it. Some are like, okay, let's wait and see, right? And but some of them are like, don't, I'm busy now. Let's let this be the third quarter thing, right?
Mhm.
And that's just because some of them are, already doing electronic medical records, right? They only have so many resourcing, right? Naturally. Um, and then some are willing to jump on, right? So to give them some credit, some have, and my job is to keep just going, telling them, even if they say no, like, hey, like I'm going to show you more data,
Mhm. Right.
consider it now,
Mhm.
and so that's really what I'm doing. I think I'm again, go use it today. If it's on our website, valiantai.co, right? Go on there, just submit a form, right? So like we can't be open because everybody would just start, it might DDoS it to death, but
Yeah.
right. So it's behind a username, right? So it's behind a username. Put in some donors, save and see if it's useful. Save a kidney, right? So like we offer it for free if you want us to come and integrate it completely on your on-prem. We are going to move to a cloud solution, right? That makes sense. A lot of people think that like it's going overseas, the data is going to go overseas. It's going to sit right next to my military servers here in
Yep.
Orlando,
Mhm.
right? Under the same security metrics we have for our military data. So, it's not like we're hooking it up and it's going somewhere else
Yeah.
to be able to access that. So like that. So that's kind of our ideal future and how we're doing it nationwide. The second thing is like our product is tailored for the OPOs, but a lot of transplant centers and surgeons have expressed interest, right? We're going to make a phone app, right? So if it's 2 a.m., you can just bring that up, look at an offer, see that percent graft survival, see how that patient outcome is going to be. And we give a you're the 9 out of 10 dentists like approve
Mhm.
of this, right? So it's essentially the equivalent, right? So we give you a number 90, and what that means is 90 transplant surgeons in America would agree for this given donor and this given recipient, right? So it
Mhm.
kind of gives a check, right? So
Yeah.
check to your own like assumptions and like maybe it's 2 a.m. and I'm exhausted, right? And at least I
Right.
can go, okay, 9 out of 10 surgeons would accept this offer. I'm pretty safe to accept it, even though it's a marginal kidney, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just another tool that they can help them, but it's easy. It's trying to, present that information. And then on
Mhm.
the OPO side, trying to get those really marginal kidneys offered up to the people who need them as fast as possible because right now they either have cold ischemia time, which means they're waiting, right? And they're waiting for a biopsy, they're waiting for additional information. But now at least they can have a number. If it's a 99% chance to be non-utilized, go ahead and try.
Right.
Go ahead and try to put it in anyone you can.
Yeah, because at
So,
this point it's going to get thrown away otherwise, right? It's going in
correct.
the trash anyway, and
Yep.
you may as well,
Try to use it.
it
Yeah.
may as well, like, yeah, that's wild, man. How do you see, the organ transplant space and industry changing over the next 5 to 10 years, and then,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, demand's going to keep going, right? So like I kind of touched a little bit on this earlier, but like there's this 100,000 people on the list, right? But there's this other, depending on who you ask, like 800,000 to 1 million people who have end stage renal disease. So when people think the waiting list is 100,000, that's like the tip of the iceberg. The problem's like 8 to 10x bigger of people who could use transplants. So if like
Mhm.
that waiting list went to zero, we would just replace it 8 to 10 times, right, with these
Right.
people, right? So there's a lot of demand here, right? And so even though, there's some cool stuff in xeno, meaning like they're trying to grow, organs on animals.
Hmm.
There's some really good perfusion technologies. What perfusion is just like you pump different liquids and into the kidney to try to make it last longer. So there's some cool pump technologies that are being introduced. And then, I hope we can solve the infrastructure and data side to kind of unlock these artificial intelligence models that are really, really good and proven already to help. Even
Yeah.
though they might not be perfect, they're already helping and saving lives. And to be able to get that in everybody's hands that can use it.
No, but I also, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it that the more data you feed to it, the better it'll get?
It does typically.
Yeah,
That's correct.
so unlocking the data would just, well, obviously there's mistakes and always needs to be a human in the decision-making loop as it relates to
Correct.
anything AI related, right? Um, like, wouldn't it just like make it better and make it more efficient and allow there to hopefully, address that problem? But like, I think like unfortunately, as you look at, and this is just in this country, right? This is not internationally where there's, I would
Yeah,
assume, other problems as well, correct?
yeah, correct. It's not so we to give it a lot of credit, right? Like the America's like one of the top organ transplant systems in the world for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
there's no doubt, right? So our European brethren and sisters, right, do operate under different rules and regulations as you'd imagine than the EU and US, but this has been briefed overseas, and right, so like the architecture can be very similar, and the data just
Hmm.
changes, right? How the data structure is. So we're also looking at bringing it international, but we're focused here in the US first, and
Sure.
I want to be, we let's solve the US problem and then go solve the world
Yeah,
problem.
no, of course. But also I think as people continue, I think it's, people we're not a very healthy society. Especially, and that I think that trend is going to continue. And you look at things like, percentage of population that's considered obese and how that's, risen over the last 50 years. I think that clearly there's going to continue to be a huge need for transplants. I think that need is probably going to continue to grow. I also think that unfortunately, when you think about the health of potential donors, more of them are going to be less ideal kidneys or less ideal organs continuing to move forward because of the health of the, people. Maybe they smoked, maybe they were a heavy drinker for years and years and years, or did drugs or drug abuser, right? And those ones or maybe they were just obese and the kidney is shot and will never go into somebody else. So obviously we can't address all of those issues, especially with AI. But as you look at this, I would assume that this problem is going to continue to accelerate, especially as you look at waste trends over the last 5 years and how they've grown. So, dude, I listen, man. I have the utmost respect for you, Richard. You and your team. You guys are actually out here doing something about it, and trying to address a huge problem in society, man. Dude, amazing work.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, it's sort of like, people come saying like, what if you're creating this business and what if the government just comes shuts it all down out of fear of AI? And I was like, look, I already won, right? Like we saved 40 lives. Like I've won, man. And all,
Mhm.
I think somebody asked me that. I was at a conference and I was like, you know what? Hopefully I get to 100 before they shut me down, right? So
Yeah.
like my goal is just going to keep going, right?
Hmm.
So I don't think they are going to shut down. I don't think that at all, but it's just the response to some people still have this hysteria over AI. It's just math. It's just an algorithm. And I think if that was said more often, people would, it's the Terminator fear of when you say AI, but
Yeah.
it's just math and it's based off historical data.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I mean that's largely one of the reasons why I started Robots and Red Tape was to help educate people about what AI actually is and how it's not like, listen, there absolutely are implementations that we could look at
Sure.
where it could potentially go that way. But if you set it up responsibly, you make sure there's a human in the loop, you're gonna, probably mitigate most of those pretty well. And also like until we do better with robotics, it's not going anywhere, right? Like it's not mobile. It can't do a lot of the things that we're looking at people are afraid of. So I really applaud you, man. As we get ready to wrap up, Richard, anything else you'd like to add? Any points we didn't make that you wanted to make? Anything that you would like, any closing message for folks in general about this and the space you're sitting in?
Yeah, hey, just go check it out, right? So
Mhm.
valianta.co. If you're involved in organ transplant in any way, any shape, go there, write us a comment, use the tool. We're happy to do it. It's free. You can use it. Like I said, go save a life. Please do. Please use the algorithm to go do that. And then, if I can help in any way, just reach out. And then, Nick, thanks for doing what you're doing, right? So like, creating a podcast where we can talk about these issues and get that information and educate people is really important because people probably don't know this exists or any of the other issues you tackle. So really, thank you for doing that, and thank you for having me on your podcast, Nick.
Dude, thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. I love your mission. I love what you're doing. I have the utmost respect for you and your team. Happy to support any way we can. Richard, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to Robots and Red Tape, everybody. Hope you're having a great day.